The first fine wasn't shocking, it was strategic, $50 for decorative items inconsistent with community standards. It was a wind chime, nothing loud, nothing offensive, just metal and glass catching sunlight on a quiet porch. When Mrs. Alvarez asked for clarification at the monthly HOA meeting, Karen smiled politely from the head of the table. "Our standards protect property values," she said smoothly. The fine remained. A week later, another resident, Thomas, received a citation. Garage door left open beyond acceptable time frame. He had been unloading groceries. Then the Patel family received a violation. Lawn edging insufficient. They had edged the lawn 2 days earlier. At first, people laughed it off. Karen's just being thorough. But then the pattern emerged. Every fine followed a question. Ask about landscaping budgets. Citation. Request board meeting minutes. Citation. Suggest lowering dues. Citation. And Karen always delivered the same calm line. If you're unhappy, perhaps this community isn't the right fit. She drove a silver sedan. Slow, intentional. Every morning she made rounds. Clipboard on the passenger seat, camera in hand, taking photos, documenting violations. Envelopes began arriving more frequently, stamped, certified, cold. The fines weren't high enough to trigger outrage. Not yet. $75, $125, manageable, but steady, relentless. And that's how you silence people, not with one crushing blow, but with constant pressure. Residents began lowering their voices at meetings, fewer hands raised, questions softened, then disappeared entirely. Karen didn't need to yell. She had discovered something far more effective: fear with a price tag. The escalation was gradual, deliberate, strategic. Thomas disputed his citation formally. He cited the bylaws, requested photographic proof. 3 days later, he received two more violations: driveway surface discoloration, improper trash receptacle alignment. The fines increased, $350. Then administrative review fees. Karen's emails became longer, more technical, referencing amendments no one remembered voting on. Residents began comparing letters privately. They noticed something disturbing. The same 5 households kept receiving citations. The same 5 households had spoken up. Meanwhile, board members' homes appeared untouched. One had an unapproved shed. Another displayed oversized holiday decorations for months. No fines. No warnings. Selective enforcement wasn't subtle anymore. It was weaponized. Mrs. Alvarez tried to sell her home, but pending violations appeared on the resale certificate. The buyer backed out. Thomas calculated his total fines, over $8,000, for things corrected within 48 hours. He requested mediation, denied. Karen responded with a final notice: failure to remit payment may result in lien placement. That was the turning point, because now it wasn't about wind chimes or lawns, it was financial pressure. And the message was clear: speak up and pay. Stay quiet and live peacefully. At the next meeting, attendance dropped dramatically. Empty chairs, lowered eyes. Karen smiled more than usual that night because silence had finally settled into the room, and she had purchased it, one fine at a time. What Karen didn't expect was documentation. Thomas began collecting everything: violation letters, emails, photos of other homes, dates, times, patterns. He created a spreadsheet, side-by-side comparisons, residents who questioned her versus those who didn't. The discrepancy was undeniable. 5 households, all critics, all heavily fined. Meanwhile, favored homes had visible violations with 0 citations. Selective enforcement isn't just unfair, it's legally dangerous. Thomas consulted an attorney. The attorney's reaction was immediate. If enforcement isn't consistent, the entire structure becomes vulnerable. A formal demand letter was sent, requesting voting records for amendments, financial breakdown of collected fines, enforcement logs for all residents. Karen responded defensively, claimed harassment, added legal processing fees to outstanding balances. But something had shifted. The 5 households weren't isolated anymore. They formed a coalition, quietly, strategically. Neighbors who had stayed silent began reviewing their own records, and fear turned into anger. An emergency meeting was requested. This time, attendance doubled. Karen entered confidently, but when Thomas projected side-by-side enforcement comparisons onto the screen, the room went silent. Not the quiet of fear, the quiet of realization. Karen wasn't enforcing standards, she was punishing dissent, and now everyone could see it. The audit was unavoidable. Records were reviewed, amendments examined, financials analyzed. The findings were clear: unauthorized rule changes, inconsistent enforcement, improper fee escalations. Selective targeting of residents who raised concerns. The fines issued to the 5 households were voided, late fees reversed, legal costs reimbursed. But the real consequence was public. At the final meeting, residents stood one by one, not shouting, not dramatic, just factual. Mrs. Alvarez described losing a home sale. Thomas described lien threats. Others described quiet intimidation. Karen attempted to defend her actions, spoke about community standards, maintaining order, protecting value. But the vote wasn't close. She was removed as president immediately. As she walked out, she no longer looked composed. No clipboard, no authority, no leverage. The neighborhood felt different afterward. Not perfect, but lighter, because the weapon had been dismantled. Fines are meant to enforce rules, not silence voices. And when power is funded through fear, it eventually collapses under transparency. If you've ever seen fines used to intimidate rather than enforce fairness, share your experience in the comments. Like, subscribe, and share. Because silence protects abuse. Exposure ends it.